cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be.
Sugar, spice, and everything nice. These were the ingredients chosen to create the perfect little girl. But Professor Utonium accidentally added an extra ingredient to the concoction, Chemical X. Thus, the Powerpuff Girls were born!
What? You're going the wrong way!
There's a lack of convincing evidence to back up Darwin's claim that there's a common origin to all life. Of course, there's what we call microevolution. Microevolution just says there's a variation between different kinds of animals.
That's not what microevolution says at all. Microevolution is any evolution within a species. Not a kind. There's no such thing as kinds. Go on.
And that's true. In my neighborhood back in California, we've got lots of different kinds of dogs.
Dogs. I hate dogs.
And that's a good example of microevolution, variation between a certain kind of animal. 200 different varieties of dogs. But in the last 150 years, science has failed to substantiate Darwin's claims of macroevolution.
Macroevolution is the opposite of microevolution. Evolution that takes place outside a species. Okay? Now, there are countless observed and documented instances of macroevolution happening. And you can find a huge collection of them whenever you type observed instances of speciation into Google. There's no excuse for making that big of a mistake, Lee.
Science has failed to substantiate Darwin's claims of macroevolution. Which is that all creatures have a common ancestor, and that natural selection, acting on random variation, can explain how fish became amphibians, which became reptiles, which became birds and mammals, and so forth. Instead, the fossil record indisputably shows that the majority, if not all, of the world's 40 phyla, which is the highest category in the animal kingdom, virtually sprang forth with unique new body plans, fully formed, and without transitionary fossils preceding them.
I'm sorry, Lee. That was a nice try, but you're talking about what is called the Cambrian explosion. This was an event where, at the beginning of the Cambrian, where the modern phyla began to coexist for the first time. And what you said about it is just wrong. There are transitional fossils preceding it. And not that you'd expect any, because they'd all be soft-bodied and not preserved, but they are there, surprisingly. And they don't just appear abruptly. They did evolve. And even if the Cambrian explosion happened, you would not be allowed to use it as proof for creationism, because that forces you to accept a 541 million year time span for life to exist. You can only do it within 6,000 years, not 541 million. So even if I was to take your point, it wouldn't prove creationism, and it would make you a hypocrite.
There's absolutely no evidence of this gradual evolution that Darwin predicted. In fact, if you were to condense the history of the world into one 24-hour period, all of these life forms would have sprung forth in a mere 60 seconds.
Except they didn't come from nowhere at randomly. They evolved. Alright? They didn't just abruptly appear. They weren't intelligently designed. And you have to reject that it ever happened because it proves you wrong.
Friends, the fossil record has just failed to substantiate these grandest claims of Darwinism.
If I may, Lee, can I guess why they don't?
Substantiate these grandest claims of Darwinism.
Is it because, perhaps, there's no such fucking thing as Darwinism? I'm pretty sure I'm right, aren't I? Because they definitely support evolution. You can look at phylogenetic trees. You can look at transitional species. Look at, there's a fine gradient, even though it speeds up and slows down due to punctuated equilibrium. Nevertheless, there is a fine gradient, and it's just. There's no such thing as Darwinism. And as Aaron Ra said, it is a deliberate insult and it's trying to equivocate an acceptance of scientific facts with religion. And it's not going to work. Shame on you, Lee.
Darwin knew it was a problem, but he predicted 150 years ago. He said, well, future discoveries will bear out my theory. They haven't. And when you think of Darwinian evolution makes the claim that a bat and a whale have the same common ancestor, would you not think we would have millions of transitionary fossils between those two? Growing into those two kinds of... We don't. Science has not found it. No wonder that 100 scientists from a wide range of disciplines, with doctorates from places like Cambridge, Stanford, Cornell, Yale, Rutgers, Chicago, Princeton, Berkeley, Purdue, Michigan, and Temple, including professors from Yale Graduate School, MIT, Tulane, Rice, Emory, and the University of California and elsewhere, recently signed what they call a scientific dissent from Darwinism.
You know you've made an argument from authority when you list that many universities. You should have mentioned Patriot Bible University, maybe, Lee? I don't know.
This is what they declared. They took out a 2-page magazine ad and said, quote, "We are skeptical of the claims for the ability of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life."
Did you notice how it said we are skeptical, not we reject? Of course we're skeptical about it. I'm skeptical about it. It's deliberately misleading. And there is no dissent from Darwinism. And the name scientific descent from Darwinism is inappropriate because we descended from Darwinism like in the 19th century. There's no such thing as Darwinism, at least not anymore. So you can stop saying it is. You won't get away with it.
In other words, the emperor of evolution has no clothes. And I agree. I agree. As Mark said, friends, this is not a faith versus science issue. This is science versus science. And I was forced to conclude that believing in Darwinism would require a leap of faith that I was simply unwilling to make.
Again, there's no such thing as Darwinism. And accepting scientific fact does not take faith. It takes either evidence or trusting that there is evidence, which is kind of like faith, but it's not completely blind, and you're not forced to have faith like you are with Christianity, or Islam, or Judaism, or Scientology. We have facts, you have fables.
You need to shut the fuck up!